love the idea of facts first stories, and I think it's empowering for somebody to be able to take control over what stories they're telling themselves and kind of be able to recognize that it's bullshit. I mean, to me, the stories are defense mechanisms.
Right.
Like they're innate ways that we try and protect ourselves from the anxiety of knowing something is not working well in our life.
Right.
And having to focus on the facts is really scary, because sometimes focusing on the facts means having to say like, oh man, I really fucked up, or this is really bad. I need to figure out how to move through it. So it becomes easier to justify it or be in denial about it or play victim to it, because that becomes...
That's a big one, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that becomes a lot easier than having to say, things are really shitty for me in my life right now, and I did it.
On everybody, welcome back to the All In Podcast Thursday Thoughts Edition. As always, brought to you by our good friends at FitAid, Cured Nutrition, Iron 3 Formulations, and First Form. Guys, as always, this is not a platform that we monetize, so if in any way you find value from this, the only payment we ask from you is that you share it with a friend and help us spread the good word. Guys, today's Thursday Thoughts is a really good one. It is not about not giving a fuck. It is more about choosing which fucks you give. Now that seems really crazy, and it is a little crazy, but guys, we have mindset expert Jess Durando joining us, and we both go really deep into this rabbit hole, and you're going to walk away with 3 magic words, and they are, I did this. You're going to hear application in negative, you're going to hear application in positive, and you're going to really start to understand how that fits in your life and how it changes the way you view which things you care most about. Guys, it's powerful. Grab a pen, grab a pad, take notes, enjoy, and we'll talk to you next week. All righty, Thursday Thoughts. Jessica Durando.
Hi.
Fun fact, your name in my phone is still Jessica Steinbook. So
Perfect.
Whenever, I always think Jess Durando, and then I go and I'm like, looking through my phone, and I type like Jessica D, and I'm like, fuck, wrong thing. So just
shows how long we've worked together.
I know, right? It's that's pretty awesome. Now,
yeah.
You guys were already married when? No, you weren't. You guys were just engaged.
I was engaged.
Okay,
yeah,
right.
We had gotten engaged and wanted to get ready for the wedding, and we found you fast.
That's right. So it has been quite some time. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. I mean, just for a mindset perspective, I think people would love to hear just quickly, like, how has that evolved? Because you came into our business as a client, really like somewhat confused in the space. And now today you're a fantastic coach, and really leading the world of nutrition inside a mindset, and also now starting to lead in the pre and postnatal arenas. So how has it gone from really like confusion slash quest for your own success to now leader? Like, what does that look like?
It's crazy looking back and thinking of where I first started. I always had a big passion for nutrition, but there's just so much information out there, and a lot of it's bad information, that, I tended to fall into the rabbit hole of move more, eat less, lose weight. There's some sort of magic bullet that I was waiting for to be able to feel more in control of my body and find a little bit of self-love. And when I came to you, I was, training twice a day and eating paleo and not eating enough of what I needed.
So familiar.
Yeah. And I felt awful, and I was gaining weight, and I was just, like you said, I was really confused. And my now husband was the same way. He trained all the time, and we just didn't know what we were doing wrong. So when we initially started, it was like, well, let's just go right to the source and have someone help us move through all the information and figure out what actually works. Mm-hmm. And then over time, I had a ton of success with you and got what I wanted. I met my goals for the wedding, but I also started to recognize that my mental health started to change, and I started to feel a little bit more in control of my thoughts and in control of my body, and confidence grew and self-love grew. And at the time I was working as a clinical counselor. So it kind of planted that seed of, man, if this is working for me, maybe we don't have to reinvent the wheel in therapy. Maybe we can start working on lifestyle factors. And I change people can day to day to create physiological changes, fuel themselves, and have more mental clarity, and have more energy to do the things that make them happy, but also maybe start breaking some food rules and changing their relationship with food and letting go of the chronic dieting that I had experienced for so long, and actually start feeling in control of their life again.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. I think that It's really cool, especially, just I think I don't know if I've told the story publicly, but I say it a lot, like to you and like to the team, and like I remember you asked about like mentoring with me, and then
Mhm.
prior to that you said, well, if I do it, is there a chance at the end that I can work for you? And I remember, like, as you were asking that question, I'm not even sure if I let you finish asking, because I'm like, the answer is yes. Like,
Yeah.
and so for so many people, the reason I was so adamant about it is because of the counseling background. Because in nutrition coaching, the success lives inside of connection, right? And we talk all the time at NCI, and we talk about this connection slash application based model. And your ability to create connection and to apply appropriately was already innate to you. You just needed different tools in the toolbox to apply it to the right situations. But that was really cool to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it allowed me to combine the skills that I had in counseling and the love that I had of connecting with people, and just be able to channel it into, a different field with nutrition, helping people create lifestyle changes and actually feel empowered in their day to day again.
Hmm.
And I think at the end of the day, that feeling of connection to another person, and being able to sit with people is something that we all really seek and we all want, but we don't always know how to get. I tend to find that's why a lot of times professionals who create jobs around connecting with other people tend to be more fulfilled. They also tend to burn out a lot faster too,
Yeah.
though, because it's powerful and
Yeah.
exhausting. But I really think we as humans crave human connection. And for me, I'm just really comfortable having those uncomfortable conversations and encouraging people to be vulnerable and try and address whatever's going on. And I think that served me well, because a lot of people aren't willing to go there or haven't had the opportunity to go there before.
100%. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that you nailed it, and I mean, it just reiterates literally everything that, fortunately, everything I've known to be true for several years. And now the public is starting to also now know it to be true, which is super cool. So we brought you on. We'll have you on to discuss like prenatal, postnatal, mindset stuff in a future podcast. Especially, I know that you're working hard on a pre-postnatal course, and so as that gets closer and we can actually share more information, we'll have you on. We'll discuss those things in more detail. But we wanted to bring you on and do a Thursday Thoughts edition. One of our things, I think it's cool. Like, people don't get to see us like communicate with our coaches very much, and so I think it's just cool to let people see like the interplay, and we have a different dynamic. Like me and every coach, we have a different dynamic, which is super cool. And you and I have a fantastic relationship, and I'll use this platform, which is we get a lot of downloads, to publicly acknowledge you're always there for me in my roughest times, but also to call me out in my roughest times. And that's something I really appreciate. And so to guys, like every single person that's experiencing success, like you will have times where you fuck up, guaranteed. And if you surround yourself with yes men or yes women that are not willing to call you out on your shit, you're setting yourself up for disaster. Part of the reason that we continue to sustain success is because when I fuck up, I have amazing people in my life to call me out, and Jessica is one of them. It's never like, you never come at me with fuck you and this and that. It's just like, hey, listen, this is an awkward conversation. We're going to have it. And you have to know I mean the best. And I'm massively grateful for that. I mean, Monday out of the hospital, we had a really deep conversation. Mm-hmm. And, it was really impactful for me, because this week's been a great week. I continue to just hear those words. And so first I want to publicly acknowledge that, but it leads me into the Thursday Thought. So I use and there's a quote that goes around a lot, right? And it's in society, and it's like, give zero fucks, or zero fucks given. And I say it all the time. And the more I've thought about it lately, I actually need to call myself out and call myself a liar, because it's not zero fucks given. We all give fucks. So today's Thursday Thought is this. It's not about giving zero fucks. It's more about which fucks you give.
Correct.
Okay? And so what does that mean to you when I say it? And then I'll give you my interpretation. We can kind of go into the rabbit hole of application.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we walk a fine line if we just don't give a fuck about anything. It's knowing where to invest that energy and time. I mean, the last thing that I believe helps create a fulfilling life is this robotic way of moving through the world. Mm-hmm. And I just don't also think that it's possible to not care about anything, especially if you're going to have any sort of full or meaningful life. And so I think that a lot of people start chasing that and they feel like there's a freedom that lies in not caring. But I really think that they're not chasing that. They're running away from something else. They're running away from insecurities, or they're running away from a negative voice in their head. They're running away from something and kind of masking it with, well, I don't give a fuck. Like we all do. And that's okay. And I think when we take ownership of that and we recognize it, it just gives us a better opportunity to say, what do I really need to focus on? Where do I really want to put my time and energy into my life to be able to make it the life that I want, to make myself happy, to be able to operate from a place of gratitude or self-worth, or whatever it is that you're seeking. And then from there, I'm better able to build and help others, connect with other human beings, be a better wife, mother, friend, coach, whatever the case may be. But that really has to first come with caring about yourself first. So for me, when I hear people say, and I've said it before too, like I'm not immune to that. We all do. And sometimes I do think that it's just a little bit of a defense mechanism. Like, this makes me really vulnerable, so I'm just going to say that I don't care about it. So that way I'm immune to whatever your judgment is or what I really think about it. I think instead, if we're like, no, it's okay to care. That doesn't mean that I'm overly sensitive or needy. It just means that I'm human. It's okay to care, but I'm going to start actually funneling that energy into caring about things that I can control, that I can take ownership of, that I can be responsible for, and therefore really create change.
I also believe there's two ways of caring. I think there's caring to where it becomes this obsession, where you become so focused on something, to put it back in the frame of the thought, you give so many fucks about it that like you're obsessed, right? And so for me, I'll use anorexia as that point, right? And so it was getting abs at 18, and I gave so many fucks about that. But like, I couldn't make the statement today, like I give zero fucks about my abs. Like that's not true. I still do. But where I choose to place that emphasis now is completely different. Back then I had no understanding that what I really wanted was attention. What I really wanted was validation. And so today I look at it and I'm like, well, of course I care what my abs look like, but I look at it in the context of like, where am I really placing that emphasis, right? Like, because it's not on the visual aesthetic, it's other things that live behind that, and how I feel and how I operate. And so I think that a lot of times people, it's way too black and white. Like I think people are like, oh, I don't give a fuck about that, or yeah, I care deeply about that, and they don't, like, there's no middle ground. And I think that so many people, like you said, they get really uncomfortable and they're like, I don't fucking care, right? Like, and we'll use finance. Like finance comes to mind on this all the time. And there's so many people that are like, their bank accounts are like $200 or $300. And I know, because I've been there. And instead of actually looking at what's in your account, you're like, I don't give a fuck. Like whatever, I'm fucking poor. And like, you just turn a blind eye to it. Right. And instead of addressing what's in front of you. So sometimes I think that not giving a fuck is a connotation for I'm nervous as shit and I don't want to deal with my shit.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, to be able to say this is an issue for me requires a massive amount of self-awareness. And again, a lot of vulnerability to be able to acknowledge it and sit with it and say, like, I fucked up, or this doesn't serve me in my life. And even when I was like working as a counselor, that was a major principle that I worked off of, is it becomes a problem when it's an impairment in your life. If somebody has $200 in their bank account and that works for them and they're happy and they live their life and it's not an issue, it wasn't my job as a counselor to fix it. It wasn't, it's not always my job as a coach to help coach them through that. But what starts to happen is that these problems grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and people don't have the self-awareness or the desire to acknowledge them and correct them. And so they start to become obsessive thoughts, like you said, or they start to really create impairment in their life. And that warrants the opportunity to recognize it and be willing to make changes around it, cognitive changes, financial changes. I've had tons of clients who maybe come to me because they're emotionally eating, and we could participate in like stereotypical self-care. Maybe you should take a bath, or maybe you should like go get a manicure pedicure. We really like dig into what's causing them that much stress. It's the fact that their finances are a mess. So me telling them to go get a manicure pedicure and spend $50 is going to do nothing but make it worse.
Exacerbate the problem.
Yeah, like, you're a mess because your finances are a mess. This is what you should give a fuck about. So let's sit down and like, maybe you can like lay out a budget or meet with a financial advisor or whatever the case may be to really be able to identify the issue that's causing you stress so you can create change and move past it and then have new energy to give a fuck about something else that really
So
matters.
last week on Thursday Thoughts, I made the statement and I said, whatever the biggest problem is in your life right now, stop trying to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And because the real solution lives somewhere else.
Okay.
And I feel like what you just said it mimics what I said, right? I think you gave a very good practical example of someone struggling with finances or struggling with food rather. And
Mm-hmm.
really like the reason they were struggling emotionally eating was they were stressed about their finance.
Right.
So the question, relative to today's thought is, in what way do we say, okay, how do we choose which fucks we give, right? And like that's a very difficult question to ask because it's like I think that so many people wake up in the morning and they're like, okay, what problems are going to hit me in the face today?
Right.
Or they, they wake up and they're like, okay, the XYZ is on my plate. I have to focus on that. When in reality, maybe they shouldn't be. So in your opinion, like what's been your best practice? And then I'll kind of share mine.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's twofold. The two things I'm checking in on is if an area causes me stress or causes one of my clients stress, it's twofold. Are we operating off of some sort of external factor? Are we playing into something that we're getting validation from an external factor, what other people think of us or how things appear to other people? Are we operating off of external values? Because what we want to do is work more from internal values.
Mm-hmm.
And also, are we playing into a negativity bias? So by
Explain.
negativity bias, I mean, negativity bias is like a psychological principle that we as humans are hardwired to focus on the negative more than a positive.
Got it.
So if you hear 10 compliments and one thing that could be perceived as the insult, you're going to be obsessive about the insult.
Got
You're
it.
going to latch onto that even more than the compliments. So I think kind of to me, the trouble that I get myself into and that I see with a lot of clients is that they're giving a fuck about things that they have no control over because they're based on external factors, or they're giving a fuck to the one negative thing and not participating in doing the work on any of the positive things. And it just creates this really vicious cycle of negative thinking.
Yeah.
And once we're swarming in that vortex of like negative thoughts, self-deprecating thoughts, self-loathing thoughts, it becomes really difficult to pull ourselves out. And all we're looking to do at that point is numb it or cope through it and do it as quickly as possible. And that comes with coping skills that might be effective, but
Mm-hmm.
they're not really the best long term, like overeating, over drinking, over exercising,
Yeah.
restricting, all of those things. So when I'm looking at like what can we really give a fuck about, it's what do you really value? What brings you joy in your life? What are we operating off of like internally? And what kind of positives can we really be focusing on? How can we rebuild gratitude and really give a fuck about those things? Because I think that that's where joy lies on the other side of.
Yeah, I have a different like approach and I'm
Yeah.
really interested in your thoughts. Like so I have this firm belief that in life, like every single day there's facts and there's stories.
Mm-hmm.
And when we wake up there's a lot of things that we could identify the facts on. Yet I think most people like to overlook the facts and they like to immediately get to the fiction because you have this control around fiction, right? You can build very positive stories in your mind, but you can also build very negative stories in your mind. And unfortunately, a lot of us are brought up living in these negative stories, continuing to tell ourselves these negative stories. And I know for a long period of time that was me. Like I continued to tell myself a lot of negative bullshit stories like, oh, you're not worth it. This is never going to work. Like, like going back to the anorexia, like you need abs to fucking to get a girl or for a guy to respect you or whatever it was. Like that was my line of thinking. Like the facts of my life at that moment where I really didn't know how to get abs. I was tired. I didn't like the way I looked. I didn't like the way I felt. Yet my mind loved living in that fantasy story. Like we fucking love fantasy so much. And so like when I look at this and I'm like, all right, how are we trying to choose what we actually give a fuck about? Like what we actually give a fuck about should be the facts because it's really like we get to tell the stories to manipulate those facts, right? But instead it's like we're so focused on the abstract, what we believe to be true or what we, can kind of try to manipulate. And so I think there's a really fine line there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, to me, I mean, I love the idea of facts first stories, and I think it's empowering for somebody to be able to take control over what stories they're telling themselves and kind of be able to recognize that it's bullshit. I mean, to me, the stories are defense mechanisms.
Right.
Like they're innate ways that we try and protect ourselves from the anxiety of knowing something is not working well in our
Right.
life.
Right.
And having to focus on the facts is really scary because sometimes focusing on the facts means having to say, like, oh man, I really fucked up, or this is really bad. I need to figure out how to move through it. So it becomes easier to justify it or be in denial about it or play victim to it because that
That's a
becomes,
big one, I think.
yeah, I mean, that becomes a lot easier than having to say, things are really shitty for me in my life right now. And I did it, and so that's why I think that there's power.
What if people actually had to say those words? I did
Oh,
it.
yeah. I mean, I think that that would be cause for radical change in people's lives,
Mm.
but I don't think a lot of people are prepared to do it. And that for me is the real work. Like maybe I shouldn't say this as a nutrition coach, although my clients know it. If my client loses weight or PRs at the gym or does whatever they want to do, I'm going to celebrate the hell out of that. But when a client says to me in a check-in or on the call, I recognize that I've been doing this wrong and here's how I'm going to make a change. That for me is the game changer.
10x better. Yeah, that's the shit that we're really after. And we talk about like which fucks do we give? I'll be super honest. Like of course I'm going to celebrate your PR, but I don't
Right.
fucking care about it that much. Like unless you paid me to PR, at which point we will celebrate our victory, I can
Right.
tell you in the grand scheme of things, your PR is not in any way why you came to me on day one. Now, I think
Yeah.
it's a fantastic step to recognize in the journey.
Right.
But let's insert the words we just talked about, right? You come to me and you're my client, right? And you said,
Mhm.
"Jason, I just PR'd my deadlift." And I'm going to make you add those 3 words at the end of your statement. And I did it.
Mhm.
Yes, motherfucker, you did it. Celebrate
Right.
that shit and be fucking proud of it. I didn't fucking PR your deadlift. I
Correct.
didn't come
Yeah.
pick the fucking bar up. Like, I didn't eat the food that enabled you to do it. You did it.
Right.
And yet you're
Right.
never willing to accept that on the positive or the negative. Because then you want to come to me and say, I ate cake. And I'm going to be like, okay, just add those 3 words for me. I did it.
Mhm.
Okay, great. It's not my fault. It's not the cake's fault. It's not your friend's fault. It's not your kid's fault. It's not your family's fault. It's not anyone's fault. You did it. And that's okay.
Right.
Right? And
Yeah.
because
It's
you've
taking
created
ownership
success
of it.
before. Absolutely. I love that. Those
Yeah.
3 words
And
are
I
way
think,
powerful.
yeah, I think that that's where clients are scared. I think that they're scared because if they say, I ate the cake and I did it, that they're going to be judged, which goes back to that external factor. Or they did a month of great work and then they had one piece of cake and that makes them their failure. That goes back to that negativity bias. And they'll tell you the stories. Well, it was my kid's birthday party, or it was this, or it was that. But they never say, I did it. They never just take ownership of it. And that's where we really create change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from a mindset perspective, that's where a lot of clients might get it wrong, and even a lot of coaches get it wrong. They go through their tracker and they're going through the black and white, and cool, the scale moved down 3 pounds, or cool, you felt great in your training, but they're not recognizing all of the steps that were needed and celebrating the steps that the client took or that they took to make that happen. I mean,
100%.
one of my all-time favorite check-ins actually was a couple weeks ago, and I shared it with you. It was a female client, and she wrote to me. She had struggled to achieve loss, and she had started losing since we had been working together. And she wrote to me, it turns out that it's not my thyroid issues that are preventing me from being successful, but man, I sure do love to blame it on my thyroid issues when I'm not
Boom.
willing to do the work. And I was like, if all of my clients could have that self-awareness, my job would be so easy. But she
Right?
was willing to go there.
And I feel like that statement should just be sung from like the mountaintops. Like it's and I think here's the crazy part. I think so many people are going to listen to that and be like, "Well, yeah, that's simple. Like that makes sense." Yet then you go and you look inside your life and you realize as simple as that is, you're not really creating it. And I think so many people understand the concept of ownership, extreme ownership, and self-awareness, but so many people are afraid to apply it. And and I think that is directly correlated with the notion of they're giving a fuck around the wrong things. Like, like undoubtedly right now, everyone listening to this podcast, wherever they are, car, gym, whatever, they know that the number one thing they should give a fuck about is their own actions. Like, the end. Yet when you operate, you're operating predicated on the fucks that you're giving about what other people think around the artificial guidelines that you believe the world has set for you, or around these fucking artificial guidelines you've inserted in your life that are not even rules. They're some bullshit fucking story you're telling yourself.
Correct. Yeah.
So the question now becomes, so we started with the Thursday thought of which fucks should I give, right? The question now becomes, how do I change which fucks I give? Because I think that's far more difficult. And the fact that you're a mindset expert here is really going to play into this, because I think, honestly, like the simple truth is I believe everybody knows that they need a transition in this, especially people that listen to our podcast, because we hit this pretty hard, right? It's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. So how do we overcome that? Like, I'm fascinated by this.
Well, I think so much of it is first recognizing that we're human. I mean, mindset changes don't come overnight. And majority of my clients have had old habits and unproductive thoughts that have become automatic. They just automatically think, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy enough. I need to be leaner. I need to be stronger. They can't really say where those thoughts came from. They don't really identify like the source of it. But they really give a fuck about it.
Yep.
And so, and it's okay that those are there. I mean, I'll have clients come to me and just like they want fat loss right away, they want mindset changes right away. And I just try and remind them, like, we've got to keep the idea that the brain is like a muscle and it has to be exercised regularly. You have to practice. If you've never worked out a day in your life, you're not going to walk into the gym and deadlift 300 pounds. It just doesn't work that way, I would imagine. And so you've got to go in and you've got to practice and do the work and practice your form as well, and be willing to do the accessory work. And if you're going to do it, you want to do it right. And creating mindset changes is like that too. But the very first step, like as corny as it is acknowledging that there's a problem in your thought process in the first place.
That's never talked about, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, I think that and it's more than this vague idea of like, I have all these old thoughts and they don't work for me. Right. So fix it. Because then we're still just displacing the work on somebody else. So it comes back to that ownership of, I recognize that my thoughts around food, my thoughts around my body, my thoughts around my relationships aren't working for me. I need to dig in and really understand it.
That's fucking big.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people are ready to admit that.
No. And they're also not willing to say, kind of like we talked about before. And by me saying I have issues with my relationship with food, I'm also willing to acknowledge that it's because I'm stressed, and I'm stressed over my finances.
And can we add the 3 words that we talked about earlier that are so critical, where it says I have inappropriate thoughts around my body, and I'm stressed, and I did this. Right. And like, that is so big. Like, just the simple identification that, hey, your thoughts are kind of fucked up, and that you did that. Like, if we, like, right now, nothing else, like, nobody walked away from IN3 with anything for the next month, and they took that, and they took the 3 words, I did this. Game over, the end. We would still have more production than any other company in the world.
Yeah.
It's that powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we're looking at going back to that concept of stories versus facts, we're always going to want to go back to the stories. Well, I have a bad relationship about my body because I was bullied. I have a bad relationship with my body because, I never fit into clothes correctly. We go back to these stories. But at the end of the day, the thoughts that we have control over that. The actions that we took, we have control over that. And I think, if we're working on challenging some of our thoughts, the best way we can do it is with a mantra like, but I did that. And it's taking ownership, and it's not waiting for things to change or for an old wound to heal. It's recognizing I played a role in this, and now I actually give a fuck about changing it, because that is where that's where like my life changes. That's where I get myself back. That's where my marriage improves. That's where my parenting improves, or my nutrition, whatever. I think one of the worst things that we do is we work on the wrong pyramid scheme.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're looking at it just in terms of relationships with others, like I'll take myself, for example, I'm married and I have children.
Yep.
So what majority of people do is at the base of that pyramid, they put their kids first.
Yep.
I got to take care of my kids. Everything goes in, my babies first.
Yeah.
And then from there, I'm going to take care of my marriage because I need my marriage to be strong.
Yep.
And then after that, with whatever is left, I have time for me. And what became really powerful in my life, and my husband and I talked about this, we're on the same page, was we flipped the pyramid upside down.
Oh.
I have to take care of me first in order to be good to in my marriage. I am a better wife when I feel good about myself. And when our marriage is strong and when I'm taking care of our marriage, I'm a better parent. And we're a better team to be able to guide and be the kind of role models that we want to our children. And that's just, within our nuclear family, you can apply that to anything.
So give me that application in the nutritional world, because that makes all the sense to me. And if I'm being super honest, I've had the same epiphany myself, like inside of the last year, and I completely am in agreement with it. But give me that application in the nutritional world, because I think a lot of people need to understand it there.
Yeah, I mean, whether it be that they're putting more of their attention on, let's say that they're in a competitive sport, on taking care of their teammates first, on taking care of their training hours, getting enough training hours in the gym, they're reversing their priorities, and they're not recognizing that they first have to fuel themselves. They have to recover. They have to be able to say, I don't want to go out tonight with friends, or, I can't do another training session. I'm super smoked. That they have to feel empowered enough to put themselves first at the bottom of the pyramid before they can really show up for their teammates, before they can really show up for their coach, before that they can get even top of the leaderboard if that's what they want. And it's, again, recognizing that we have to do the work internally first before doing it externally. Now, you take a people pleaser like me, and that is tough. Like it feels
I know the story.
Yeah, like it feels so selfish to be like, sorry, got to put myself first. But, I think that there's a difference between selfish and self-care. And so if we're really willing to prioritize ourselves first, not even just to be better for everybody else, but because we know we're worthy of it, we in turn will be better to everybody else.
I believe there's a certain level of what I call selfless selfishness that everybody needs to have. But as you were saying that, I just had this thought in my mind, and now it's going to escape me. But as you were saying it, what came to my head was, creating excuses is just giving away power. And we talk a lot about on this podcast about owning your power and how it's massively important. That we're all very powerful people. And when you're building excuses and you're shifting blame, and anytime you blame anyone or anything external, you're giving away power. And power is required to give the right fucks. Right? You don't give the right fucks from a position that lacks power. And so all of a sudden you need to look inside yourself, and everybody should do this right now. Like literally pull your fucking car over, pause the podcast, do whatever you got to do. And right now, grab a pen, grab a piece of paper, and try to write down like the last 15 things you've complained about. And then go back and look at them and understand, how am I giving away my power? Oh, you're complaining about the fucking traffic. No, motherfucker. You should have taken a different route, or you should have seen like what the traffic patterns were, or you should have left earlier, or just understand that, hey, it's this thing called life and shit happens. But you bitching about it is putting you in a bad frame of mind. Oh, you didn't hit your macros. Well, guess who has supreme control over what goes in and out of your body? That would be you, right? And everybody wants to, and listen, it's human nature. I'm not immune to this. I have my complaints, but every day I really try to check myself, and I'm like, why the fuck am I complaining? Like, I live in a state where right now it's like 80 degrees and sunny, and I'm healthy, and I have a business, and I have friends and family, and I have people that I'm able to create impact with, and like, what the fuck am I complaining about? And like, could things be better in certain areas? Of course, but I think that we're all human, and we're always trying to evolve to continue to be the best versions of ourselves. So I don't think that pursuing success is inherently flawed. I believe it's actually the fundamentals by which we should all be living. But I just, like, as you were talking, I just kept hearing this voice that was like, giving away power. Complaining is giving away power. And I don't know, like, does that resonate with where you were going with that line of thinking?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of that goes back to like one of the best ways to interrupt anxiety is through gratitude, like giving power to the real. Like you can give a fuck about the good stuff, give a fuck about what you give your power to. It's also recognizing that, yeah, I mean, anytime that we don't feel grateful or we're practicing negative thinking, it's definitely giving our power away. But it can also be deceiving because we can give our power away to things that are perceived to be good things too, and even thinking of examples with like the pyramid thing, like shredding season is happening right now. And for clients who are healthy and able to cut, it's a great thing. It's a community approach. They're super pumped about it. It's, I'm
There's
going to
all the shit talk going on. Like, it's a great time.
yeah, like I'm going to try and take my body to a new place, and it might be with a healthy thing, but then all of a sudden maybe they're putting all their power into winning or the outcome or what they got to do to get there, and they're not really focusing on the process, and they're not focusing on self-care, and they're not focusing on saying, you know what, my body's not super happy with going this low calorie right now. Maybe how I feel and my biofeedback matters more than winning this prize.
Well,
Or going to
how about this? So that just brought up like another thought for me, and this will be a thought that we use, I'm sure, on like a later Thursday thoughts. But your views around circumstances today, and your views around circumstances, 90 days, 6 months, a year from now, can be completely different, and it can literally be the same thing. And so, and using shredding season and the example you were just giving, last year I really didn't even participate. I said I was going to participate, and I just did it. I couldn't get my head in it. I couldn't get my heart in it. And to be honest, physically, I never felt like I was in a place where I should be doing it. And what's that? Because I did that 100% because I fucking did that. Right. And how crazy is it that's so applicable that like, because I did that, and that's the truth. Right. But let's flip that though, because in that moment, I felt very defeated. Right. Mm-hmm. So if I'm being fully transparent, I felt very defeated. I felt very much in a position where I'm letting people down. I'm not giving people 100% of myself. And it was a shitty feeling. And yet here we are today, not quite 2 weeks into shredding season, and I'm going through medical shit, yet completely crushing it. Like physically, mentally, more invested in a routine than I have been in quite some time. And now I look back on last year and I'm like, well, I did the right thing. And now I look at last year, where last year in the moment, I'm like, this is shit. I can't believe I'm such a fucking schmuck. Like, why am I fucking doing this? And then I look at it now and I'm like, well, God, the reason I'm creating success this year is because I listened to myself last year. Correct. And it's amazing how that thought process becomes an evolution. And so I think so many people now, like the way you see something today, even if it's hyper negative, may not be the way that you see it forever. And I think that we got to remember that in good and bad times, right? Because in the bad times, it's very easy to understand, oh, shit, well, what seems hard today might seem like a blessing later. But I also think we have to remember that in our positive times. What seems like such an amazing accomplishment today cannot be also over-celebrated, and cannot be – you need to learn from that to continue to evolve as well, right? And so I think it has to go both ways, but – I love that vision of, as you were saying that, like the way that we see things, it totally is going to evolve. And it's like, it can change the fucks that you give.
Right. Well, and it should. I mean, first of all, I don't think that the right thing is always the easy thing. So Agreed. I think sometimes, like doing the right thing might make you feel shitty about it. That doesn't mean that you putting yourself before other people's judgments or deadlines or whatever, false ideas you had created around shredding season meant that you did the wrong thing by putting your health first. Now you're able to see that payoff long term. But, maybe certain beliefs that people have, political beliefs, religious beliefs, whatever, maybe they stay the same for an extended period of time. But if you're willing to do your own work and you're willing to maintain a growth mindset, things should look different in the future, because it means that you've evolved and you've taken opportunities to change and grow and learn from situations that you've been in. Just like you can look back at certain situations and been like, man, I thought that was as good as it was going to get. And you know what? That was actually a learning opportunity for me too. And I think that what becomes like really, really amazing is to have the self-awareness when you're going through it. So not just the self-awareness to be able to look back and be like, oh, in hindsight, that could have been different, but to be in the moment and be like, you know what, I'm just going to be really open at this point in my journey, because I think I'll view it completely differently a year from now.
So that's got to be one of the hardest things in the world, because I put myself back in my shoes last year, and had you said that to me, I think that I've evolved enough as a person that I probably would have heard it, but if I'm being honest, I'm not sure I would have accepted it right away. I would have definitely listened to it, and I definitely would have considered it because I try not to shut anything out, and I try to really embrace everything. But I also, if I'm being honest, I would have probably said to myself, like, yeah, right, you're just trying to fucking, be positive and get me through this because you care about me and et cetera, right? How do we instill that in people? How do we get people to trust that and believe that? Because it's so hard. I mean, here we are a year removed. Well, it's easy to look back and be like, yeah, because here I am inside of success. But back then I felt disappointed and let down. And how do we change that?
Well, the difference is believing it now, you've got evidence. Believing it back then required faith.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot trickier because that's a tough thing to just believe in something and risk it not working itself out. That opens ourselves up, that makes us vulnerable, that makes us sensitive to however things could pan out. And I think one of the best ways to practice it, because again, it's not something that happens overnight, one of the best ways to practice it is really start giving a fuck about being present in your own life and giving a fuck about silently observing, passively observing everything that happens while trying to remove the emotion from it. That doesn't mean be robotic about it. That just means not being so judgmental about yourself and everything happening around you. And I think by actually focusing on being present and not fearing as much, not fearing failure, not fearing like taking responsibility for yourself, it allows you to really give a fuck about the things that are going to create real change. And, I found for myself being present allowed me to take better care of myself, allowed me to find more enjoyment in the things that were going on in my life because I was able to really be in the moment and not feel anxious about thinking what was going to happen and not feel depressed thinking about what already did happen,
Yeah.
but just, yeah, like really being present and able to observe things and be like, yeah, this is cool. Things are going great. It's temporary,
Mm-hmm.
but I can celebrate it and enjoy it for what it is now. Things are not going so great. Okay, like what can I learn from it? How can I grieve it? It doesn't mean you don't feel
Mm-hmm.
anxious,
I
sad.
and I think that's the important part. I think a lot of people try to suppress that inside
Yeah,
of, and it goes back to the whole I don't give a fuck. Like, no, you
right,
do give a fuck. Like, in
right.
fact, you need to give a fuck.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm a big, big fan of Brene Brown. Like, if anybody hasn't heard of her, I highly recommend her. And she did a TED talk called The Power of Vulnerability. And
Uh
it's like
huh.
one of the best TED talks. And one thing that she talks about that I think that we forget is that we get so busy trying to numb the uncomfortable emotions, the shame and the guilt and the anger and the sadness, that we don't realize that we're also numbing all of the really good emotions too.
That's something
Want
I had never considered.
like if we want to be happy and joyful and grateful, and those are things that we're seeking, but we're too busy eating our feelings or overtraining or restricting or telling ourselves how terrible we are, then we're inadvertently removing our own opportunity to feel joy too.
That's interesting. I love that. I love that notion. I really like. I've never considered the fact that like when you try to suppress the negative, you're also suppressing the positive because you don't just get to suppress one feeling. Like you
Yeah,
suppress
we can't cherry
feelings.
pick.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
that's
can't be like, I'm
interesting.
never going to feel sad, I'm only going to feel joy. Like, that's just
Yeah.
not how emotion works.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Um, so okay, so we've never done a Thursday thoughts where we've had a guest, and I really love this because I love the idea of like taking a thought and just like pushing it out there. And honestly, I love that we have like the mindset expert behind Thursday thoughts on the on the first one. So that's super cool. Um, so tell me as we close this, right? Like one final thought. If everybody that listens to this podcast, and we're talking about the framework of the fucks that you give. It's not about not giving a fuck. It's about the fucks that you do give and focusing on the right fucks. Um, give everybody one action step that they need to do today.
I would go through your day and write down anything that's causing impairment in your life. Any complaint that you had today, any sort of negative thought you had, anything that triggered an unhealthy behavior or an unhealthy thought pattern, write it down. Simple as that. What we're trying to do is start opening ourselves up to self-awareness. We're starting to try and recognize the things in our life that consume our thoughts that are negative and don't serve us anymore. And I think we spend so much time trying to fix those thoughts without even recognizing what they are in the first place. Like, I'm just negative
Mm,
all the time. I'm so stressed all the time. And how do I fix that? But they're not really even identifying the root cause of it.
yeah.
So You feel a little anxious today? Write it down. You feel a little sad today? Write it down. You're pissed because someone took your parking spot? Write it down. I mean, we minimize things that have so much power in our lives, and we don't celebrate the things that also are in our lives. Like, doesn't serve you, the next day write down what does serve you. You get that parking spot you wanted, celebrate it. You know, you got a great client check-in, celebrate it. Like, whatever it is, we're starting to recognize the negative, recognize the positive, so we can start replacing the negative with the positive and actually giving a fuck about that.
I love that. I love that, guys. You got a fucking firsthand lesson from the mindset expert in this world, and there's nobody else I go to in my world. And you guys know, like I feel like I have a pretty powerful mind. I am able to think critically on like a lot of things and see things that people don't. But this is my go-to resource, and so you guys just got my secret, like my biggest secret, uncovered today. But you know, more than anything, I also want to just quickly plug the mindset course. Because guys, as coaches, and you know, as professionals, one thing that we should always be focusing on is the self-development aspect. You know, you're not going to be the best version, you know, the best coach you could be unless you're the best version of yourself, and your clients are not going to be the most successful clients unless they're the best versions of themselves. And we all know that as coaches, compliance is key, and we also know that those of us that are hiring coaches, that we need to comply to the program that the coach has set forth. And the real difference here is being able to find yourself in this process. And that all comes down to mindset. It is the single most overlooked aspect of success, period, but especially in nutrition coaching. So guys, NCI has a mindset specialty course. It is taught by Jessica, and it's just mind-blowing how good it is. I've watched it twice. I watch the online materials whenever I need a little pick-me-up. And so I'm just going to quickly plug that and have everybody consider that, and give you guys the URL. It's just ncicertifications.com. Look for the mindset course. And Jess, I just want to thank you for your time on this Thursday morning.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, dude. And thank you just for being an amazing influence in my life. And thank you for being an amazing coach to so many of our clients, and preparing education to take so many people to the next level inside of this mindset and pre and postnatal arena. So just really excited for the future, and just couldn't be more ecstatic, you know, to have you as a friend and a mentor. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
You got it. Guys, we'll talk to you next week.